WoW tokens, what are they all about then? The core concept seems simple enough. It's a way for players to purchase something from Blizzard using real-life money and then sell it on to other players for in-game gold, which is a bit like real-life money, but you tend to spend it on potions and enchants rather than, rent. Anyway, that's something that you're buying and then selling on. This token can be used by the other player in the transaction to add game time to their account. So essentially this system can appeal to those players that don't have a lot of spare time but do have some extra cash, or indeed the players that do have loads of spare time but could do without the subscription fee each month. As I said, it seems simple enough, but there's a little bit more to it than that. For example, the way in which the in-game price of these tokens has been decided so far. It's not 100% clear how the system works, but as far as we know, Blizzard choose a starting value, 30,000 gold in the States, and I think it was 35,000 in Europe, which launched this week. But then that price is changed almost immediately based on demand. As of making this video, the US are now looking at a value of around 21,000, whilst Europe has settled at 32. And I find that weirdly fascinating, a virtual in-game economy that is deciding the exchange rate, I guess, between real-life money and this in-game gold. And then on top of that, there's other interesting discussions to be had. You see, people have been selling gold for money in World of Warcraft before now. In fact, they've been doing it for years via third-party websites, some of which have pretty poor reputations, with horror stories that tell of personal information and card details being stolen and passed on. And more worryingly than that, we've heard some pretty awful stuff in the past about the working conditions of the people involved in acquiring this gold in the first place. All in all, it doesn't sound that great. So yes, at £15 or $20 a pop, there's a very obvious financial incentive for Blizzard with these tokens, but I think there is more to it than that. I think it's unfair to say otherwise. And I want to talk about that. So I've grabbed a Mr. Scott Johnson for a chat over Skype, and you might know him as, well, actually a rather brilliant cartoonist, or that guy that does all of those podcasts on the internet. But more relevant to this video perhaps, and topic, he's the host of The Instance, a long-running and very popular World of Warcraft cast. Excellent. Let's hear what he has to say. Hello, Scott Johnson of The Instance. How's it going?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
So can you talk to me about WoW tokens a little bit? Do you like them for a start? I haven't played WoW in a few years, so I'm kind of eager to hear.
Well, I like them in the sense I like them in the sense that I liked when Blizzard comes up with new ways for players to figure out ways to play, and oftentimes that takes the role of actual in-game mechanics or something to do with the actual playing of the game. Once in a while, though, it takes the form of an outside service or something that seems designed to not only benefit players, but perhaps benefit Blizzard or the kind of space they've created with their game. In this case, a lot of people would argue that the WoW tokens are ultimately a decision on Blizzard's part to curb the selling of gold by illegal third parties.
Sure.
And some would argue that that's already having an effect. Some would say it's not going to have an effect at all. But as far as my take on it, I only have really one big problem with it. The idea of paying gold in-game currency for in-game time is a great one. There's a lot of players that could really benefit from that. There are plenty who will never care, who are just like, well, it's $15 a month or whatever it is in Europe, and I have the expendable income, so it's not a big deal for me. I'd rather do that than grind out all this gold. Also, the fluctuating kind of value of these things is a bit of a factor. But all of that is great, and I think it's fine, and I think it's a good way of them to deal with this thing and to approach this problem. However, my only real complaint is I think it's confusing for average players. There's things about it that strike me as just a little bit obtuse and not exactly on the nose in terms of how to easily understand it, and even their documentation makes it seem simpler than I think it actually is, whereas the actual simplicity of it is negligible. It's not all that simple in some cases, So if I was to have any real complaint to leverage against it, I think it just is confusing and hard for players to get their heads around.
Do you think there's been a change in how the community reacts to services like that? Because I can't help but feel like a few years ago when, not just in terms of how players thought about World of Warcraft, but thought about games as a larger thing, the idea of combining the in-game currency with actually being able to buy game time. I can imagine people being really mad about this around the kind of Wrath of the Lich King era.
So Blizzard's kind of, in a way, in the WoW space, in that particular game anyway, they're very late to the game on this stuff because...
Sure, Ether's done it before, right? And WildStar, maybe?
Correct. WildStar also did it. Obviously came out much later, but also implemented this much sooner. I think it's just been an issue of WoW has not been in a position where they've had to, and technically they really still don't have to. My guess is this is total guesswork here, but I'm thinking that this issue of, well, eventually we've got to come up with a way to curb gold selling. How can we do it? Well, put it on the whiteboard, and that'll be one of the things we think about. But as the years have gone on, they've maintained a huge player base, so they don't really have there's no real drastic need for a program like this. Yet there it was, and it was still something they were interested in, and it just got pushed and pushed and pushed till eventually they got to a point where, they're outsourcing a lot of art stuff now. They're doing a lot of stuff with more outsourcing so they can work on more games internally, and that has freed them up to say, well, what about color blindness mode in the options? What about these other things that we probably could have implemented 5 years ago but didn't have the bandwidth for, but now we do? I feel like this is just another one of those. This is a chance for them to say, we've talked about this. This has been a thing in the past. It will become more and more of a thing in the future. And we've never really figured out a way to stop gold selling. So why don't we come up with a way to solve all three of these problems, or so many problems, in one fell swoop? We'll call it the WoW token, and we'll see how it does. And so they're in a position now where they can experiment a bit more with that stuff. I do think, though, to answer your question, if you would have introduced something like this back in the Wrath of the Lich King days, it would have just confused people. Because first of all, back then, nobody was really doing anything like this. And second of all, it didn't seem like there were other alternatives when it came to MMOs or games in general. Free-to-play had not taken any kind of hold yet. And even mentioning it was taboo back then. We're now at a place where it is being done terribly in some cases, but quite well in other cases. And even Blizzard with Hearthstone and Heroes of the Storm are implementing good, acceptable, player-liked implementations of free-to-play mechanics. And they've been slow to make changes with WoW because it's still a subscription service. There is no way to just outright do a free-to-play model there. So they'll do, well, here's a charity pet you can pay for, and that'll help go to relief in, some tsunami hit country. And here's a pet you can buy. It's $25, and it's not for charity this time, but you don't have to buy it, and it doesn't affect gameplay. So it's like this slow rollout that I think is smart on their part, because they would have alienated a lot of players a lot sooner. There's still people who hate it, and even the mention of it, they hate it. They won't go near this kind of thing. They think gaming is being uprooted by this new pay model. But I tend to take a more centrist approach on it, and I think it's probably this. Blizzard has made a good example of what you can do to approach this in a meaningful way, not go too crazy, provide value for the things you are charging for. They're doing that with their other games. Well, now it's a chance for them to try to do more of that with things like this in-game token, and we'll see how they do.
What has the kind of general reaction been to it? Because I am not really invested in the WoW community in the same way I was. I haven't seen too much fallout outside of that. What's it been like, on the WoW forums, on the subreddits?
Well, there was a real outburst in the beginning from everybody just at the mere mention of it. And people had forgotten that this was actually seen. Some data had been data mined from patches and a few things where there were some references to things. Nobody was quite sure what those were. At one point, the combined early sort of metadata that seemed to refer to what became the WoW token was unearthed about the same time as a veterans appreciation program, which everybody assumed, these are the same thing. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a free-to-play model for veterans of the game. People have been playing for a certain amount of time. They'll now have a free version of the game to play. Sure. Where they could pay up, in a kind of free-to-play way for other things. And this took the internet by storm. People were sure it was true, and they were decrying it, telling Blizzard it was a terrible idea. And as it turns out, and the blue posters were pretty quick to get their heads around this, the Veteran Appreciation Program turned out to be those free bronze statues of the orc on the wolf that they sent out to 10-year veterans of the game. It had nothing to do with the WoW token. And that was a thing that was absolutely free and, estimatedly cost them, and this is my numbers, but we think it cost them anywhere between $26 and $30 million to do that little gesture. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I guess they have the money. And I think they genuinely, I think they genuinely do appreciate their 10-year veterans. So I don't take a very cynical view of that, but the other bit with the WoW token turned out to be kind of on the nose, and it's not terribly unlike what EVE Online does and others do. I think now that it's all been exposed and it's actually in the game now, there are two camps. People who are there are three camps. There are people who are still like, I don't care. I don't want to learn about it. It sounds terrible. I don't want nothing to do with it. That group always exists, and they're going to be flailing in the wind. Then you've got this group in the middle who says, oh, I get it. We're going to watch it like the stock market. The value fluctuations have been interesting. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I won't do this. This is interesting from a whole new perspective of like, kind of a economic kind of markety kind of watchy thing.
Yeah. That's a big appeal.
That's very fascinating. Then there's this third group who doesn't know what the hell's going on. And that's a group that I think Blizzard has to address because they really don't get it. Because there's nothing about it that makes sense to them. To them, it would be like, well, so wait, you're saying I can buy something that will let me play the game with gold? Like, why aren't you just letting me pay for my game time with gold? Like, straight up, just per month, it costs me 10K in gold. Why am I not just doing that? That confuses people. They don't understand this thing that Blizzard only makes so many of, and then the bids go high, and then they go low, and then they go high, and it seems to be overnight fluctuating between 30K and 15K, and why is this happening? And until they address that or figure out a way to make that make more sense to that group, then I think it maybe I shouldn't say it's failed. It just hasn't reached everybody it could potentially reach.
Sure, it takes a little bit of working out. Okay, cool. Well, one interesting question, I guess, is: do you think it will actually stop the third-party gold sellers? Because we've spoken to a couple of them, and they're already trying to undercut the prices that the WoW tokens are kind of fooling around. Does this make it more difficult for them?
I think it makes it. How should I put this? I think it won't make any difference.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they won't shift around and things won't change. They will, like you just said. They're already figuring out ways to undercut it. But that's the whole point. It's like coming up with better security. You can't just come up with a good encryption security for a server and then leave it, because they'll figure out a way around it. So you got to keep at it. It's never about winning the war. It's always about continuing the battle. And It's the same for Blizzard. So they have a vested interest in figuring out a way to do this. I don't know why Blizzard doesn't just, and maybe I've answered my own question by, well, I'll tell you what I think they should do. If Blizzard just became my third-party gold seller and said, go to battle.net, give them $50, get 1,000 gold, whatever the market value is. That to me would curb more gold selling, because
1,000 gold in WoW these days isn't very good.
No, that's true. That's true. And that would fluctuate too, right? Like that's going to be a thing, would always be a moving target. But if they did that and they became my source, it eliminates all the problems I have with gold sellers, which is A, it's not sanctioned or, technically legal. It's also not places I trust or know. Can I put a credit card into one of those sites without it being spread all over the place and stolen? The truth is no, you can't, because there's plenty of them where examples of that have happened. Blizzard's method wouldn't mean a bunch of slaving away gold acquirers in some terrible warehouse in China somewhere getting paid nothing to do it. Like there's all kinds of humanitarian and financial and security reasons why if Blizzard just sold me the gold, I would rather give my let's say $50 to them for my 3,000 gold, if that's whatever it's worth. But I would totally do that. And I think a lot of players would do that. To me, it's akin to like before iPods and iTunes, to give Apple some credit, perhaps where it's due, before those things hit and happened, previous to that, the best way for you to grow your digital music library was to steal it. It's just the way it was. Suddenly there was a legit, affordable, sensible way to do it.
Yep.
And everybody, now not everybody, but a huge portion of that base changed. The industry itself changed, and suddenly there was a model. So Blizzard just needs to establish the model and say, we're the gold seller. We'll keep the prices low. Yes, gold sellers may still try to undercut that all the time, but I'd still rather give them my money than,
It reminds me somewhat of the quote from Gabe Newell about Steam and how they kind of tackled piracy and the idea that if you offer a better service than piracy, you can win that war, or at least win a large number of the battles.
Yeah, a huge portion of that stuff goes away if you provide a legitimate way that is as convenient or more convenient than ripping them off. And gold selling seems like the natural way to do it. I mean, the funny thing is, it's not like Blizzard's first time to the rodeo here. They screwed up in their own admission with the way they implemented the auction house in Diablo 3.
Sure.
And really stung that otherwise incredibly well-made game. They've since recovered from that. That expansion pretty much fixed all our woes, and that's an amazing game, and the auction house is nowhere to be seen. And as far as I know, they're not having any problem with third-party gold sellers or hacked accounts or any of that other stuff that they were so worried about. Mm-hmm. But having learned that lesson, I know that they must be very careful about these decisions. I'm guessing that none of this gets through easily anymore. And so the very idea of this WoW token is probably years in the conversation
Sure.
and very slow to implement because they don't want to screw this up.
There's a few steps from the whiteboard to it actually ending up in the game.
Yep, I would agree
Cool.
with that. So to me, they've yet to make the case entirely. And I am dyed in the blue Blizzard fan, day as night. Love those guys. Love almost everything they do. I think they make incredible decisions. They're one of the smartest developers on the planet. There's a reason why they are where they are. But this one feels not undercooked, but maybe the problem is they're just a little too tentative with it. It's a little too careful.
Yeah.
Because what they've done is they've created something that is kind of hard to get a beat on, and because of that, most players are just going to go, I just want to do what's convenient and quick. And sadly, for a lot of those players, if they're already kind of cool with buying gold from third parties, that's more convenient and quick.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for your time, Scott. I still find World of Warcraft fascinating. I still go back to it with every expansion. Just, I don't think I'm ever going to quite kick that. And that's
hard,
that's
right?
all right, you know?
Yeah, it's a good thing for them because they have their lulls. Like, I feel like they're having a bit of one right now between patches, which is normal. And some players are like, I think I'm going to do other stuff for a while, but we all come back, man. Every time is something. It may take a couple of years, but in the end, the crack is too inviting and we go back.
Cool. Well, if you don't know already, Scott Johnson hosts the Instance podcast, which is the largest World of Warcraft podcast, right?
Still is, as far as I know.
When I was listening.
Yeah, still is, I think. We still have the world's largest guild and just a really great community. And if people like that show, can be found wherever podcasts are. And we still doing it, still kicking it every week.
Good job, man. Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
And thank you for watching. If you made it through to the end of this video, it suggests that you're probably, a massive nerd, which is great because we do other videos about video games that you might like as well. Here are some of them. You can click on them. There's an annotation if, you want to hear about State of Decay. It's a good game. I like it. Or we've got a show and there's a video about Star Wars. That all good stuff. Cheers. Bye.